The purpose of this video is to help prepare you for some extended response questions on Christianity. We've looked at Christianity in terms of significant people, practices, and ethics, so that you understand Christianity as a dynamic and living religious tradition. You would be familiar with these terms from your preliminary studies of religion. A dynamic religion is one that can be interpreted according to the needs of the times without losing its central ideas. A living religion is alive and active, and it's when those four characteristics of religion are interacting creatively to meet the needs of adherents in society and culture. If we look at our HSC verbs, we'll be able to see how these verbs are evident in some past paper questions. If we look at 2012, there's a stimulus or a quote, "Men, women and schools of thought have reformed and or revitalized the Christian tradition." How well does this statement reflect the impact on Christianity of one significant person or school of thought other than Jesus? If we look at our dot points for Christianity, this is quite straightforward in that it refers to the dot point on significant person or Paul of Tarsus. And we can see some of those words from our dot point evident in the question. We have development, so Paul's missionary journeys, his epistles, and the Council of Jerusalem. How did those actions reform the very early Christian church? And the word expression, how did he revitalize the Christian church in terms of what he taught about beliefs and how he practiced those beliefs? Very importantly, we need to have a look at the impact of this, because if Christianity is a living religion, it's being practiced today, right down through the ages to our present time. And we can see this in that word impact. So what did Paul do in the early church that is still having an impact on Christians today? We need to be able to evaluate this in looking at outcome 5. We need to be able to say to what extent is this influence still being exerted in the lives of Christians today. Just think about Paul's teachings on agape love, how that is impacting on the lives of Christians today through the example of bioethics and the responses of different denominations in light of ethical principles to bioethical issues. We also have those key verbs from our syllabus, explain and analyze, to show the interplay between what he contributed and how that has impacted today. Another example could be Paul's teachings on the death and resurrection of Jesus and how that is expressed in baptism, and how Christians are called every day to die to themselves, to rise to a new life in Christ, to ultimately become more Christ-like. Stop the video now and copy out this question and the annotations and plan your own response to this question. If we look at the 2010 question, this also has a stimulus. By this, all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. And that's from the Gospel of John. With reference to the quotation, evaluate the influence of Christianity in the life of adherents and the Christian community. So looking at the quote, the key word is love. Of course, that is agape love, and that immediately brings to mind those key ethical principles. Say, for example, love one another as I have loved you. A closer look at the question and words from the outcomes evident in the question. We have outcome 2, which describes and analyzes the influence of religion and belief systems on individuals and society. You don't really have to look very far to see that agape love, mentioned in the quote, is still exerting an influence on individuals in society and society itself through ethical principles and teachings. And we see that in bioethics, and we see the response to those teachings in slightly different ways by different Christian variants or denominations. And we're then asked to evaluate that. To what extent are those influences being exerted? We can refer to Paul of Tarsus in our response, particularly with regards to his teachings on love. Here you can also talk about the ways in which Paul guided those early Christian communities on how to treat one another and how to live in community. Just think of Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind, etc. Christians are still using that chapter to Corinthians that Paul wrote as a guidance for their own lives. That particular chapter is often read out in wedding ceremonies today. That is the ideal way in which people in Christian relationship should treat one another. We can, as we've already mentioned, talk about bioethics, and we can talk about baptism as well, because baptism relates to agape love and the way Paul taught adherents to live in community, because that's what Christianity is. It's not only a religion of the individual, it's also a faith that is practiced within community or within relationship. So just a closer look at those dot points. We have bioethics very evident in agape love, and our area is bioethics. We have that teaching of Paul on agape love. There's many teachings that Paul gave us, in particular how to live in community, how to bear in sufferings for one another and with one another. We also have analysed the significance of the practice for the individual, the adherent, and the Christian community. And you can link that as well to agape love, because in baptism, an individual joins the Christian community, and it is that Christian community's responsibility to surround that individual with all those aspects of Christian love, such as empathy, compassion, patience. Love is kind, love is generous. Look at Corinthians chapter 13, and Paul wrote that to the community in Corinth. Stop the video now and write out this question along with all the annotations, and also plan your response in how you're going to bring together those 3 dot points to answer this question comprehensively. The 2013 extended response for Christianity, you were given a stimulus, a little diagram, to see how those 3 components of your syllabus documents link together, how they are different and how they overlap. And you are asked to discuss the relationship between at least 2 of the aspects shown in the diagram and the way they contribute to Christianity as a living religious tradition. You need to annotate this question, and you need to map out a structure in terms of how you are going to respond to that question. Just keep in mind these few points before and during the writing of your response.